Okay, this is take like 4, I think. Hopefully you don't have to look through the other 4 takes that we did. But this is going to be our Inside Gateway. I believe it's our 45th edition. And I have with me today, I have Brian Wenninger, who is a math teacher, but also a mentor, part of the LARC program. Then I have with us also Josh. Josh is a former resident. He unfortunately stuck at my house for a short period of time. I don't think I scarred him that bad because he's doing pretty well now. So, and so we're not going to revisit everything that we said earlier, but I wanted to at least recap that a little bit. And I'm going to start off just kind of by ping-ponging and ask a few questions of both of you. So, why don't we start a little bit about mentoring and your mentoring relationship? I know we've talked a little bit in the past. LARC was a concept, I think, but really hadn't started officially when you guys actually got connected and started mentoring. So I'd like, Brian, maybe you can start off and talk a little bit about, mentoring and what that kind of looked like with Josh and how that developed, and then Josh, I'll kind of get your perspective on it next.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I was a math teacher at Gateway, and when Josh came, I didn't actually have him in class as a math student. I think you had already exceeded all the math levels that I was teaching, if I remember correctly. But we did find some common points that we connected on. One of them was running, and one of them was computers, writing software. Josh had an interest in both. I had an interest in both. And that started a relationship where we started running together. We would train for races, or we actually worked on some software projects for the school at Gateway together, where Josh wrote some of the code and I wrote some of the code, and that just kind of started a relationship. And then that kind of morphed into, at some point, Josh started coming over to our house. The kids absolutely loved him. They loved to wrestle, beat up, I don't know what all. They just really enjoyed having Josh be a part of the family. And so it got into a pretty consistent routine where Josh was down. He would have supper with us, not every night, but maybe once or twice a week, something like that.
About once every week.
And the kids just kind of got used to, we all got used to as a family, just having Josh around. Instead of there being 7 of us, there was 8. And we continued to run together, continued the computer relationship as well, but then it morphed into, we were just kind of doing life together. So that's kind of how it started, and as you mentioned, that was kind of before LARC, but then LARC kind of put a program around that concept of how do you build relationships with people to help them out if need be.
So that's Brian's short snippet. Josh, you get your second take. It's like a bowl again. This is really nice for you. I'm curious though, from your perspective, what were some of your first interactions you remember with Brian, and then from your perspective, what were some of those, how did that relationship develop, from your eyes, and the value that maybe you saw in the relationship that you had with Brian and with the family?
Well, first, slight correction. I don't think I had an official class with you, but I thought there was one class that I ended up having to take just because something didn't transfer, or just because I needed a class. I knew that more of a kind of I just thought that it was, hey, somebody else who could help me run, who could help me, better my time, I used running a lot during the time. It was that or riding my bike. At first running, and then I got a bike, and then it was kind of both. But I like to keep moving. That's how I think. So it was definitely over running that we first connected. But yeah, kind of like what Brian said, after a while, I kind of started coming to their house again. I could almost count on it. Every week, I was actually kind of sad on the weeks that it didn't happen, which were few, but they kind of broke my heart. But yeah, it's definitely fun, hanging out with the kiddos and, helping around at the house when I could, getting a lot of help on different things, just working out. Yeah, after a while, I can't say all things, but most things, if I had an issue with, I'd share with Brian. But yeah, it's definitely, very, yeah, you're definitely kind of LARC before LARC became LARC. So,
you were kind of like you kind of helped blaze the trail, so to speak. in a number of different ways.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, that happened here, and I think that's something that's really awesome, and I think that's something that's important too when you try to foster relationships, is finding some stuff that you have in common that can create more of a natural bond. So it makes it easier then to transition down the road. You said it started with running, right, Josh?
Yeah, it did.
And then eventually you're spending time with the family, and then there's tough things that you need to talk about and they need to go through. But you probably wouldn't have done that on day one, you know. When the first time you're running,
probably.
No.
Because I didn't need to step it up a few levels.
So it took time. I mean, like any relationship, it takes time to grow and to develop. And so I'm curious, Josh, if we were to talk to, let's say either it's a resident or maybe somebody who is a former resident or somebody who has transitioned out and doesn't have a lot of support that's close by. You know, what's your perspective now on the value of having a mentor or like a mentor family in your life? What would you say to that person that's maybe doesn't have the support and that's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of cool. I'm not sure I want that or not. I'm not, you know, what would you say to somebody like that? What would be your thoughts? You know, a follow-up question I had for you, Josh, is think of whether it's a resident or a former resident or a kid that's maybe transitioning out that does not have a lot of support. Speak to them if they're trying to sort through, hey, you know, this whole mentor thing, I'm not sure I want, you know, an extra person telling me or talking to me or giving me feedback or advice, or, you know, or just trying to sort it out. Maybe they do or they're interested, but they're just not sure. They're unsure about that whole relationship. Can you speak to that person? What is your feedback on a mentor and the value of a mentor in your life?
So basically, why do they need a mentor?
Do you think they need a mentor? Is there value in it?
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. It's almost like I think that's what he wants me to say. No,
it's more like it's like, to me it's kind of a no-brainer. Like,
okay.
I mean, you know, like a lot of times I know when I was at Gateway, different residents would tell me, you know, that I was too soft, you know, that I was a softie. And, you know, part of it was because, like, I was more inclined to, you know, actually accept help. I mean, if I need $100 and I see $100 laying in the street, am I going to take it? Or am I just going to leave it there? Because, no, I don't go off hand-me-outs. You know, and to me it's kind of like that, like, yeah, an extra person in your life, it will suck sometimes. Forgive me, but
yeah,
it's like, yeah.
Sometimes you don't like to hear what they have to say.
Most of the time, you don't want to hear at least some parts of what they want to say.
Sure.
And, you know, but I mean, like, good people, they care about you. They care about you more, you know, than they care about, you know, them, and they definitely care more about you than they care just about their own advice, you know. And, like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, something that I'm learning is all of us need help. It doesn't matter how much I grow spiritually. It doesn't matter how much more I am mature than other people my age. It doesn't matter. Yeah. At the end of the day, if I'm not getting to the next level, I'm dying. And to get to that next level, I need other people, you know. Like, mentor, like, it's, me and Rob were talking about it, and it's like, it's not this crazy, weird term. It's just basically, like, two people helping it, like, one person trying to help the other out. And a lot of times, as, you know, Rob told me, it often ends up going in reverse, too.
Yeah.
I mean, so,
absolutely.
If you don't need a mentor, the other person does.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate the fact, and I would agree with this. I think that all of us have benefit and a value in having a mentor in our life. And I don't care where you're at in life, whether you don't have family support and don't have that, or whether you do. I think there is value in having people that maybe have a little more experience, maybe a little bit older, that can speak truth into your life, that can encourage you and that can challenge you. And you're right, sometimes it's not easy if you have somebody that's challenging you in an area that maybe you're struggling with, or maybe that is hard, but sometimes that's what we need. We need kind of that, the kick in the butt. Or like you said earlier, that's not on tape, the proverbial slap in the face, I think, is how Josh's term that you used it, which I thought was good. Brian, I'm curious, what have you learned from playing a role of mentor? What have you learned from that experience?
Sure. I guess one of the thoughts that comes to mind, as Josh has already alluded to some, there's times where the person who's being mentored doesn't want to be mentored or doesn't want to hear particular things you're saying or so on and so forth. And so I think one of the things maybe I've learned is not to approach it with this kind of idealistic perspective, and definitely not to approach it as like, I've got the answers and they need the answers, because it is a process through which we learn both. So I'm learning as he's learning, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so that concept, if somebody is to approach that role with kind of like, I've got the answers and I'm going to be able to tell people the answers, it's kind of the wrong perspective to take. It's not necessarily easy. There's times, Josh can probably remember some specific details where he and I didn't necessarily see eye to eye, probably more often than not. And that caused tension. But to recognize like there's gonna be tension, and it's gonna take some time to work through that. There's gonna be some work involved, some emotional capital, whatever buzzword you kind of want to throw in there. But it's not something to necessarily just be approached as like, hey, this is another thing that I can check off. Like, hey, I did this. It's something you've got to be invested in, and just kind of give yourself over to. One of the things that I found was really helpful was the fact that we didn't necessarily do the mentoring as just myself and Josh. We just kind of pulled Josh into our family. So there was obviously times where Josh and I just hung out, the two of us, when we'd be running, or other times where driving back and forth, we'd get a chance to talk, just the two of us. But pulling Josh kind of into our family, it became more than just two of us. And that, for myself anyway, was helpful. It doesn't necessarily feel like you have to bear a burden completely by yourself or anything like that. So I'm not sure I answered the question exactly, but those are the thoughts that come just of, if I'm thinking about it from a perspective of what somebody might think mentoring is, it's probably going to be a little bit different than what you might be expecting.
Yeah. Josh, I'm curious, what is something that you've learned through having Brian and Mackenzie and their family in your life? What's something that you've learned? You don't have to do it. So I asked him, what did he learn and what was the value to him? What's something you learned?
What's something I learned?
Let's put him on the spot.
Yeah,
That's assuming that you learned something.
No. I learned something. I'm just trying to figure out how to trace it.
I'm trying to remember, did we do donuts on a string one time?
Yes. Yes,
You learned how to eat donuts off a string?
It was fun.
Okay.
It was a lot of fun.
I guess that I don't know, like, I'm thinking like probably the biggest thing that I learned that meant the most to me, which I have to do a little backstory to. My whole time when I was at Gateway, I really kind of hated myself, because out of all the guys, according to them, I seemed the least Kylie. If that makes any sense. And I really wasn't comfortable with being me. I don't really like going out and starting fights. Like, I don't really like the whole macho act. In fact, if anything, I prefer to shrink just so that the other person is happy over, just, trying to, always rise up, always kind of puff my chest out. I've never been a big fan of that. But for a long time, I thought that was what a man was.
Yeah.
I thought that a man stood for what he stood for no matter what. That a man was never wrong. A true man would never back down. And I think, that's probably the biggest thing that I learned. And that's why, for me, I actually love, hanging out with your family. That I could kind of see, okay, sometimes men are wrong. Sometimes, we don't always have all the answers, and as I'm sure every woman will say, we need help just as much as anybody else. I mean, and kind of like just seeing how that plays out, and seeing, like what the role of, a man in marriage is, and in raising kids and in raising an atrocious amount of kids. And, just.
You do realize they're probably going to watch this later.
But he didn't say anything bad about an atrocious amount. There's nothing that's wrong with that.
I'm just saying, I mean, on my bad days, I won't have that many kids. On my good days, well, we won't talk about it. But yeah, just like, kind of like actually learning, like, I guess what God says a guy is,
Yeah, our society sometimes can put images and thoughts in our mind to define who we should be as men, and most often those are off, and they are tainted, and it can be really difficult when we measure ourselves by a standard that God never intended us to be measured by. We can really look and say, I don't meet that standard, and so that's really awesome to speak to those points. So, yeah, I really am enjoying our discussion here. I'd like to, first of all, I want to make a comment here because Austin will probably look at it later, but Austin did text in one of your friends and someone that I had in my house too, but he was hoping to be on live and couldn't, but he did text me and said that they wish he could be on and comment, and he said to keep your head up, and I want your response. Do you remember what your response was to that comment?
Oh man.
Or maybe it won't come again, but that's okay.
Is, so Austin, don't you worry, my neck is a lot stronger than it ever was, and I'm not afraid at all of my head rolling off my shoulders. So I'll keep my head up. I don't think you need to worry about that.
Well stated. So no, I know that. I know my wife chimed in earlier too and wanted to wish you the best too. I'm glad that you're on too, Christy. So it's been neat to kind of see growth. So I'm curious. We'll start to kind of work our way to the end. Josh, tell me a little bit about kind of where you're at now in your life, and kind of, and then maybe what's kind of the future look like, or some goals. It could go short term, or you could go big term. But like, where are you at kind of now? Because we're talking mostly 5 years ago, although you guys still have a relationship now, but it started 5 years ago. So kind of bring us up to speed today.
Well, as I'm sure anybody watching this could tell you, this is a gateway.
Yes.
So now I'm like part of the Love Church with their fan bed program, and of course going to be leaving soon. But yeah.
So what's your next step?
My next, again, like kind of looking forward to, kind of having a chance to kind of like really fully step out into the world, prove to myself that I actually can do, what I think I can do. At some point, I'll be going back to Russia. When? Don't know, don't ask.
So to go back and visit.
Well, to go back and visit, hopefully find some people, like one of those 23andMe, but more so, because I've always kind of had this, almost like a special pain in my heart for Russia. Like a special place in my heart where, this is gonna sound really cheesy, but I could like feel Russia's heartbeat. Russia's crying, I kind of get a little more down. It's weird.
That's part of that's part of your heritage.
And
that's where you spent the first half, or maybe not half, but how many years were you in Russia? 9 years. So that's a significant portion of time.
And I think God wants me to go back, but I'm not sure. So definitely first to visit, but maybe I'll stay there. Maybe I'll, I thought about there's organization down there that kind of helps provide, like not just housing, but more kind of like mentoring, and I mean it is a residential, but kind of helps orphans when they graduate
Okay.
from the orphanage transition to normal life.
Okay.
In Russia. So I may join that, praying to God that I will find a wife before then. I'm fairly confident about that. Something's happened that I think might lead there, but anywho,
Yeah.
before I get sidetracked.
Yeah.
But yeah, just, I mean, like right now I'm just trying to like take things slow, get myself set up straight, because so gonna just plan to stay in the area, but my life never was my own to begin with, and like it amazes me how many people, even people that didn't get things right, put time and energy and effort and tears into me, into who I am now and who I'm going to become, and so at least for me, giving back to somebody else, reinvesting, paying it forward isn't really an option. It's just something that, why wouldn't I? So.
Wow. Yeah, that's really powerful. Brian, your final question I have for you. I think it's your final question. Somebody is interested, inquiring about mentoring. You've gone through this. You guys have a relationship. It's been for 5+ years. You've had a relationship. Speak to that. What is? Speak to that person that's sorting through that, and what does that entail? And what's you've talked and interwoven you guys' relationship, but kind of speak to that person that's maybe got some interest in saying, hey, I think I might be with this, but not just still trying to figure things out.
Sure. Yeah. If I can, I'm gonna go a slightly different direction to begin with. First, thanks, Josh, for the kind words. Even I forget exactly how you said it, the extreme large amount of kids. But no, thanks for your words. I appreciate it. Another thought that comes to mind, and I will get to your question, is just the concept of over the last couple years, our relationship has been a little bit different. With Josh being here at FanBet, there's been a little less interaction, but we're kind of excited to see that interaction kind of regrow here in the very near term. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
But then to your question, as far as somebody looking into being a mentor, a couple things come to mind. One is somebody watching may have heard us talk about the fact that we had some common interests, and that's what started. And I'm going to just guess that somebody out there is going to be like, yeah, but I probably don't have any common interests with, a person that's at Gateway or something to that effect. And I guess I just want to go on record of saying, sorry, you're wrong. There is a commonality that all of us share, and it just takes a little bit of getting to know somebody to find those things. When Josh walked into Gateway Woods, I couldn't have told you that he liked computers. I couldn't have told you that he liked running. It took a little bit of interaction to find those things. And so I guess I would encourage somebody who's kind of contemplating mentorship to take that first step and just get to know somebody. It's not going to be probably in the first time you meet somebody. It might be the second or the third or the fourth, but as hopefully you've heard in the video, over time you just start to do life together. Yeah. And that builds a relationship that I value greatly, and I think Josh does as well. Another thought that comes to mind is there's an organization called the Navigators that I became familiar with a couple years ago. My brother and his wife became a part of the Navigators, and they have a document called Born to Reproduce. And the concept is, in a physical way, God has created us that we can reproduce. And as you mentioned, we have lots of kids. But the same concept is supposed to happen spiritually. And so as God has allowed us to be reborn spiritually, what we are then supposed to do is be about the rebirth of others. We are born to reproduce. So we've been reborn to reproduce spiritually. And that's just an awesome opportunity as a mentor to be able to come alongside somebody and just share life with them. Disciple, whatever word you want to throw in there. But to be able to do that also in a spiritual side, to see a rebirth. I will say over the last 5 years, we have seen God do some pretty awesome things with Josh.
Amen.
Thinking specifically of a relationship that was really rough you had, that is just beautiful now, as I understand it. And that is only a God thing. And so it's just, you get to see some awesome things of God at work in people's lives when you invest.
Yeah.
So I just encourage people to do that.
Josh, do you have any final thoughts? I'll give you it's an open mic before we kind of sign off.
We did have a question come in. Christy wants to know if you want to
question.
share any of your favorite memories from your time at Gateway, and if you've ice skated since your little incident with Maple House.
Oh
Ooh.
boy, that was a little.
So 2 questions, not one. I'll answer the easy one first. No, to my shame, as a Russian, I have hung up my ice skates, and I haven't skated since that fateful day.
Did you go with us one time?
Once.
Okay,
So
so
that is true. That is true. Thank you for jogging my memory. But after that, I hung up my ice skates.
You tried it twice.
Tried it twice, was good at it, and now I am busy. So just wait though. You'll see me on the Russian figure skating team one of these days. Man, favorite memories. Oof. I'd say the one that definitely is way up there is Gateway Woods Talent Show. That was awesome. Me and a resident did a song, We That Maple, Pine House. I still don't like you for trying to steal that. Especially a specific assistant house parent. You know who you are. Do not mess with Maple.
Maple did rock.
But yeah, and I mean, that was just cool because, I mean, especially, I guess it was really cool because, one, to be real, Gateway is part of the AC Church. Rap, I'm surprised I even was able to do it. Thought I was going to get burned at the stake. And
That's a little harsh.
Now that reminds me, was that what led to J Noise?
What?
Was it the talent show that kind of fed into J Noise, or was it a little before then?
So I thought about it a little before then, but that's when it kind of really took off. And then after that, I ended up juggling around like 4 different names. Jay Wizzy, which someone else came up with. Props to you. Sorry I didn't pick it. And like that's always been part of my life. I haven't had time to focus on it since, but it was just cool, like that's the thing that I'd say I probably loved the most about Gateway, is that we all had, like all of us residents had different backgrounds. Half of them didn't really take my side on much of anything. Well, actually, I don't think any of them did. We had many dramatic battles in English class and arguing, and not to my shame, I cussed some of them out. But like at the end of the day, like we all could, kind of come together and do something like that, and we all kind of, it was weird, we all kind of had this trust in each other, even though at times we would hate each other's guts and everything, but like, and that just kind of showed to me, like, I mean, everybody, all the residents, I don't know, like, I was really embarrassed, like, they were treating me like I was some actual, like, Eminem or something, like, but it was, that was a good memory, and all of the Gateway Woods plays, though all of those were awesome. That's all I can say.
Did you get to do 3? Was it 3 spots, or was it 2 spots that you had in the Gateway plays? I kind of think you had.
In the
3.
I did 3 different plays.
Because you came back.
Because one of them was after I already graduated, but they needed.
And you
someone
played
else.
the villain
In all 3 of them.
In all 3 of them, and it was a very good villain.
Yes.
I might add.
You were a good villain.
My parents to this day are not happy, but I'm like, I'm a good villain. What can I say?
Oh,
As long as it's not real life.
It's not.
No, it's not.
Oh, well, I really appreciate, Josh, you taking the time. Brian, you coming down as well. I wish you the best. I'm really proud of where you're at. It's been awesome for me to see. I interviewed the very first time we sat down, and so looking at where you're at 5+ years later is really amazing. Praise God. It's really awesome. So I'm really thankful for coming out. So with that, peace out. We're out of here.